We're going to go ahead and continue to talk about confidence intervals. And we're going to also take a look at what a bootstrap is and a bootstrap distribution. So we'll take a look at bootstrap samples, distribution, our standard error, and then once again our confidence intervals. So quick review, we start with our population, we get a sample, and that tells us our statistics, either the mean or the proportion. And then we really do use technology to do many, many more samples. And that gives us our sampling distribution, which gives us then the standard error, because that's the standard deviation of our sampling distribution. And then that helps us with our margin of error. Remember, for a 95% confidence interval, your margin of error is 2 times your standard error. And that helps us with our margin of error to get our confidence interval. So this is kind of where we ended the last video. And we did have one small problem that occurred. Well, what was that problem? We only had one sample. So how do we figure out how much our sample statistic varies if we only have one sample? That's where the bootstrap idea comes into play. So to help you understand bootstrap, suppose you have a bag of Reese's Pieces and you were wondering how many orange ones they had. So you dumped it out on the table, you kind of moved all the orange ones together, counted them out of the total, and you discovered it was 52 orange ones out of 100. So that is our sample proportion. Notice the hat right here means it's from a sample. But the question is, what would be the true proportion out of all Reese's Pieces? What's the proportion of orange? So we need to quote unquote imagine a population. And to do that, we can really just take our original sample and make many, many copies. Well, what do we assume when we do this? We're assuming that our original sample was representative of the overall population. If it wasn't representative of the overall population, we're going to end up going astray. But we're going to assume that it's representative of the overall population. So basically, we take our original sample and we shrink it down so we can get more and clone. Here's another original sample, another original sample, another original sample. We do that over and over and over. We get this huge population made up of our original sample being repeated many times. Now, we could continue to do that. However, in practice, we don't really make infinitely many copies of our original sample. We do something called sample with replacement. In other words, we would go into our, well, we'll just do this on the next slide. So suppose our sample of 6 people is given to you here. Now, that's our original sample. You could go ahead and simulate your population by doing lots and lots of those. But for the most part, we take our original sample. We're going to go ahead and do a bootstrap sample. So we randomly select one person from here, and we get the blonde-haired person. Then we put them back because we recorded our results. We randomly select another one, we get the red-headed. Then we still have our original 6, and we randomly select another person. It happens to be the blonde one again. And then we randomly select, and we get this round one. And the round one shows up again. And then we do our last one. We get the kind of the scary looking one here with the way the face is. But this is our bootstrap sample. Your bootstrap sample is done with replacement. So pretty much you choose one person out of here, you record your results, put them back in, randomly select another one, might be the same person, might be a different person, but what You select one, you record it, you put it back in to the original, and you keep doing that. Your Bootstrap sample is always going to be the exact same size as the original. And then whatever it was we were collecting, we would then figure out our sample statistic from that. So when you think back to the Reese's Pieces one, you take your bag of 100 uh, Reese's Pieces, our original sample that had the 52 orange and therefore 48 that were not orange. You'd have them all mixed together. You'd randomly select one Reese's Pieces. You'd record what color it was, orange or not orange. You'd put it back in, mix it up, grab another one, record it as orange or not orange, put it back in, and you do that 100 times because that was our original sample. Then you'd figure out your new proportion from all those 100 or from our new 100 samples that we just did, and you'd record that. Now, we could actually go ahead and do a second sample the same way, but it all boils down to reaching in, grabbing one Reese's Pieces, recording what it is, orange or not orange, putting it back in, grabbing a second one, and doing that 100 times. So, as you look here, if the top is your original data, could the bottom be the data you get from a bootstrap? And the answer for this one is no, because there's a 22 that shows up in the bottom, and 22 was not part of our original sample. So there's no way you could have selected a 22 when it wasn't a part of the original sample, because remember, your bootstrap always uses your original sample. And so if there's no 22 in your original sample, you can't get a 22 out of your bootstrap. So is this one here correct? Once again, we have our original sample at the top. Could this bootstrap be correct? And the answer here is no, because it's not the same size. Remember, our bootstrap or our original sample at the top had 5 different numbers: 18, 19, 19, 20, and 21. This one down here only has 4. Your bootstrap sample has to have the exact same sample size. Could this one be a sample, a bootstrap sample? Well, it's the same sample size. We have an 18. Well, 18 was our original, part of the original. 18 again, which was part of the original. And yes, because it's bootstrap, it could show up more than once. Was 19 part of the original? Yes. Was 20 part of the original? Yes. Was 21 part of the original? Yes. So yes, this could be a bootstrap sample when we are using that replacement, which we always are with bootstrap. So your bootstrap sample is a random sample taken with replacement of that original, and it's got to be the same size, which gives us then our bootstrap statistic. From doing that bootstrap sample, we figure out either our mean or proportion. And if we do that many, many times, figuring out many, many bootstrap samples, figuring out all those different bootstrap statistics, and then we plot all those, that gives us our bootstrap distribution, which is nice. So we take our original sample, we get our statistic from that, then we go ahead and do many, many more bootstrap samples. And each one of those bootstrap samples gives us that bootstrap statistic. Then from all those bootstrap statistics, we get our bootstrap distribution. We'll demonstrate some of this stuff with StatKey in a second or a different video. So I'll still talk about it here, but we'll actually do a live demonstration of it in a video. So here we have our Reese's Pieces. We had, for our original, 52 that were orange out of 100. Then you could actually generate one sample at a time and watch it being displayed. And you could move your mouse around and get on top of that mouse or that point that was displayed, and then it will show you what that one was for your bootstrap over here. But for the most part, we want to do this many, many times. So we're going to generate, say, 1,000 samples at a time. And that's going to help us figure stuff out. It's going to help us figure out the standard deviation of our sampling distribution, of our bootstrap sampling distribution, which, once again, is that standard error. So our population has a given mean or proportion. In this case, we're saying mean. And then we take a sample, we take another sample, we continue to take samples, and we do that many bootstrap samples, and it really are these little seeds dropping down out of our population. So when you're doing bootstrap, you're actually growing your tree out of your one sample that you had, and you're taking bootstrap samples out of that. But it still ends up giving you pretty much the same distribution. Now, keep in mind that the estimate of our sampling distribution, the standard error, comes from our bootstrap. Now, oops, just a second here. It may be different than our original mean of our population that we had over here in the last slide. Now, our bootstrap statistics are to the original statistic as the original sample is to the original population. Very key here. However, the sampling distribution is centered around our population parameter, but the bootstrap distribution is centered around our sample statistic. Is that a problem? Not really, because we're more concerned about that variability, which is that kind of standard error that we're looking for. The variability of our bootstrap statistic is very similar to our sample statistic. And remember, our standard error is the standard deviation from our bootstrap distribution. So, quick review, we take that, we sample, we get our statistic, we do our bootstrap samples, we calculate our bootstrap distribution, which tells us our standard error, which is the standard deviation of that sampling distribution, which gives us our margin of error, which gives us our confidence interval. So, does this work for other statistics when we're estimating those different parameters? Yes. Pretty much we're going to use the exact same process, whether we're dealing with proportions, difference in means, difference in proportions, our standard deviation, or our correlation. Doesn't really make a difference. So, we can use the bootstrapping method to assess the uncertainty around any sample statistic. And that can help us with our 95% confidence interval. Now we're going to stop this video and we'll continue this one here on the next video.